Lets it fly. It's caught by Thomas. There's the record for Peyton Manning.
Saludos and salutations, Broncos country, and welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I'm your host, Adan Diaz, and joining me, as always, is at Richie. Richie, how you doing today, my friend?
It's Raiders week. We needed a double dose of Bronco. This is my dog, Bronco. I am doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much. Guys, before we get into the recap of last week's Steelers game, just want to remind you guys that if you enjoy the content that Richie and I provide here on Broncos Talk, then you will enjoy the content that is spread out throughout the MHRT network. As we just said, we have Broncos Talk, which airs every single Tuesday at 7654. And on Thursdays, we have the flagship show, the Mahai Roundtable, which airs at 7654. And then on Fridays, we have the Nothing Rhymes with Orange and Blue podcast with Johnny and Isaiah. And then before every game day, we have our new show called The Neigh-borhood, which airs just before every single Broncos game. And for every home game, we have a live tailgate with the Mahai Prophet. So, guys, make sure you click those thumbs up, hit the notification button, subscribe so that you get live notifications whenever any one of our great shows goes live and that you never miss a single second of it. So, with that being said, Richie, let's get into this past week's recap because I mean, it's crazy. I've seen the highlights so many times, Rich, because unfortunately I wasn't able to see the game live. I was at work, but I was up to date with all the live notifications, and I couldn't really believe what I was reading, Rich. It almost felt like I was reading, like it was telling me a story of a game from last year. It felt like that, and even though the ending was pretty close, where the Broncos were so close trying to tie the game and force an overtime, unfortunately, that result ended in almost the same result that happened against the Ravens 2 weeks earlier, where the Broncos threw an interception. It's the very first interception for Teddy Bridgewater as a Bronco. So, I mean, Rich, it really sucks when you think about it because we need to get out of this funk of the offense just dragging for, what was it, almost 3 quarters? I mean, something's got to give here. And as much as we can go around and say, you know, it was Bridgewater, it was the running game, it was the tight ends, it all goes down to coaching. It starts with coaching. And I really think that Pat Shurmur's seat, it's got to be on fire at this point in time.
I was going to say, if you were about to say his seat is hot, I was going to say, I think there's a stoked flame that's engulfed that seat at the moment. Really, I think any fan who is a fan of football, and you don't have to be a Broncos fan, you just have to be a fan of football, could look at the way that our offensive coordinator planned out that game and just knew it was not going to work. So as an example, and I hate to reinvoke just nightmares for our fan base, so I'm going to apologize in advance, but it gave me visions back to that Super Bowl loss to the Seahawks. So, you know, we had that fumbled snap right at the very beginning of the game. And from that point forward, you kind of said, we're in trouble. Mm-hmm. And like I've heard from several others in various places, the first 3 to 5 plays are typically scripted. So you made that mistake knowing what play you were going to run as you went onto the field, and you still made a mistake.
Yeah. And before we continue, guys, if you guys have any comments or questions for us, please make sure you put them in the chat. Richie and I are going to try to get to every single comment and question during the show. We apologize if we don't get to everybody, but we're going to do our very best. So with that being said, let's go and say hello to some of our people in the chat. Dave Glassman saying, must-win game this Sunday. Blue and orange hearts, of course. So very right. Avatar saying, I 100% agree with that statement, Dave. What's up, Broncos country? Avatar, how you doing, my friend? EJ also saying, what's up, Broncos country? Hello, EJ. Shadowjacker saying, hello, Broncos country. And No Name, which is a name that I don't think I've seen before.
I recognize the name. I So I'm assuming I recognize the name. If you could let us know in the chat. I believe No Name is an affiliate of Sev.
Okay.
And I've interacted with a No Name. I don't know if it's the same one on YouTube on Sev's channel. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. We're signing John Braun, and that's something we're going to get into a little bit later in this podcast. Thank you so much. Mohammed Badri saying, good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to you, Mohammed, I'm sorry. Mahai Prophet saying, Buccaneers are removing Gruden from their ring of fame. Yes, I did read that, Mahai. And that's, I mean, as much as we would like to get into the whole John Gruden thing, and Richie and I will give our thoughts about it later on in this podcast, I just think that it shouldn't really come as a shock. I mean, everything that Gruden built in his career is going to come tumbling down. So this is probably just the tip of the iceberg for John Gruden's career in the NFL. But going back to the recap, Rich, the fact that the Broncos defense has not lived up to par these last 2 weeks is really it sucks. First of all, let's get that out of the way. And it's just been subpar playing. I mean, so far, the signing of Kyle Fuller has kind of just looked like, I don't know, like there was a reason Chicago let him walk. I could, maybe they should have told us why. Like, I wanted somebody to go out there and say, well, Kyle Fuller is not playing at 100% because, he's injured. That would have made a whole lot of sense. But unfortunately, he's not playing like an injured player. He's just playing like he's not, like he doesn't know what he's doing, like he's lost in coverage, So it just, I mean, you would figure for a guy that's trying to sign a big contract when it's him and Callahan, that he would go out there and play his absolute best, like he did for Fangio when he was in Chicago, that he would go out there and give it even more than he probably could. But unfortunately, it's been totally the opposite way. And at this point, Rich, something's got to give in terms of either you ship up or you ship out.
Well, I think we're in a bit of a dilly of a pickle, if you will. Our challenge is that we have Darby who's out, and he's supposed to come back this week, so that's great. And I think what we really need to see is Harrison, I think is the correct pronunciation of his last name. I think at some point you need to start moving him in more and kind of seeing what he's got in terms of his natural position instead of just on special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And, we need to start looking at that broader depth after, for not just this year, but also getting valuable game reps to see where maybe they can fit in, maybe years to come. And I do agree that what we're seeing out of Fuller is just simply not good enough. So on the flip side of that is, all right, so you got Surtain on one side, you have Callahan, and then who's the other guy that you're going to try to bring in and you're starting kind of standard package there. And you got to start looking at other guys. Ojemudia is going to eventually be back soon.
Mm-hmm.
Ish, there's been some promising news that has come out with regards to how he's doing, but we have to have a bridge. We have to have that person that can come in and fill that gap for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And with Darby coming back and Ojemudia eventually coming back, we need to start filling out that depth.
No, I totally agree. And, on the opposite side, on the offense, we keep seeing just glimpses and it's Javonte Williams is just playing some amazing football, Rich. His run, he was almost to the end zone. And unfortunately, you knew he was going to make a rookie mistake sooner or later. And spiking the ball, I mean, I get it. You were excited. You almost had a touchdown. It would have been really awesome. But unfortunately, his emotions caught the best of him, and he was flagged for it. So it sucks that it moved the Broncos back, and it took away a possible scoring opportunity for the Broncos where they had to settle for a field goal on that play.
I understand rules are rules. I do. And I think it's important that the rules are enforced, but I also think that it's important that the rules are enforced evenly. And I think what we've seen in some of these past games is that they're not. We've had several calls that have not gone to the Broncos that were pretty egregious, blatant even. And as a result, I do think that the NFL should have shown some degree of balance there. In my opinion, what should have happened is EJ, that should have been left to the run that it was. And I believe the refs should have pulled Williams aside and said, "This is your one and only warning. We're sending this back into the league office. Don't do that again." That should have been, or would have been, I think it's 10 yards, if I'm not mistaken, is the penalty.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a rookie. There needs to be some form of discretion here. And I think that's important.
Right. And, that the boss Mundung is jumping in, and he read my mind, because this is going to be my next point. Here's the bigger question. Why was Von covering Chase Claypool? Rich,
line shifts.
When I saw that play, and I just kept rewinding it, and in my head, I just kept thinking, why? Who in that coaching, was it Fangio or was it Ed Donatel, who thought it was a great idea to put a speedy receiver like Chase Claypool against Von Miller? And like it boggles my mind. Von Miller, as great as he is, playing coverage has never been his strength. It's probably one of his many glaring weaknesses, if I had to say, because I mean, we'll all remember that beautiful pick play he had against the Patriots in that AFC Championship game in 2015. That was fabulous. But even that play was pushing it for Von, because Von went on record saying, "Hey, I was nervous as hell when they told me I had to, cover Gronk, one of the greatest tight ends the NFL has seen so far." So it makes no sense why they keep putting Von in coverage, or any of our linebackers, to put it at that, because this isn't that kind of a team where we have a linebacker. Even, I mean, we don't know if Jonathan Cooper can play that, or Malik Reed, or hell, maybe even Bradley Chubb. But Von Miller, at his age, at this stage in his career, should not be trying to run and cover speedy wide receivers.
No, I mean, jokingly, you say throw Shelby on him. I mean, he caught Tyreek Hill. But at the same time, I do agree. You can't have your outside linebacker, who is known and frankly will be in the Hall of Fame one day for his elite pass rushing skills, and have him chase a 6'4", pretty quick wide receiver, Canadian, I might add. I had to rep the Canadian. And so, I mean, he's easily one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, he really came onto the scene pretty strong. And the other question I have on that play as well was, where was the safety help? So Von managed to basically keep pace with Claypool by and large. So, I mean, that should be commended. So good on him. But at the same time, where was the safety help over the top, especially since the pass, it was pretty clear that, where the pass was going and when it got there. There should have been downhill safety help and other guys helping there to kind of deflect and block that ball, or at least knowing that they're moving and sweeping everything over to that one side to help protect our team from getting hit big.
Travis Tarbox jumping in saying, "Evening, fellas. I pretty much have lost all faith in this coaching staff." And you know what, Travis? You're not alone. I can't say that I've lost all faith, but it's starting to get harder and harder every Sunday when they show Vic Fangio, to sit there and say, "Okay, I believe in Vic Fangio. I know Vic Fangio's defense can get a stop. I know Vic Fangio's defense can get a turnover. I know Pat Shurmur's offense can, get the ball rolling, and not at the very end of the game when you used up all your timeouts, and the opposing defense is, like somebody said earlier in the chat, just softening up." And no name, thanks for coming. Just softening up, and they're just trying to kill time. It can't happen that way. If this Broncos team wants to compete and make a push for the playoffs, even as a wild card, it's going to be harder for this team. And the coaching needs to, if it doesn't step up, it needs to go. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of people calling for Pat Shurmur to be fired midseason. As much as we don't like Pat Shurmur, I don't think that would be the best idea now, because we don't know if bringing in somebody, let's say like Mike Shula, would bring in and help, make things better. It would be kind of like going through the same thing if Drew Lock was the starter and you gave him another offensive coordinator. It'd be the same thing. So just give Pat, and I say that because if you give Pat Shurmur enough reason to be fired, then that decision will be made a lot easier at the end of the season. Whereas if you gamble mid-season and it turns out to be even worse, then you're just going to be sitting there like, oh, well, maybe we should have just stayed with what we had. And I know there's a lot of football to be played still, Rich, but these losses cannot keep piling up. Something's got to give.
So at first I was actually with you on that comment and I don't mean like in this pod. I mean, after the game and during the game and even last week, I was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't get rid of Shurmur. We should kind of ride this out and see what happens. After last game and after we saw the performance that Shurmur put out on the field, and frankly, just some of the play design and play calling and not only just the plays themselves, but also the flow of the plays and when they were called. I'm sorry, as an NFL veteran offensive coordinator, as far as I'm concerned, you did not put our team in a position to win that game. And at the end of the day, we did not end up scoring as many points or more points than the other team. So you have to start looking towards the offensive side of the ball in terms of where our shortcomings were. And you cannot rely on defensive picks. You cannot rely on pick sixes of the defense all the time. There are games where you're going to want and need your offense to step up. So I'm going to kind of push back on that comment just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. And I'm going to say, I don't think some of the plays are necessarily the problem. I think that some of the plays can actually be quite successful. They have to be called in the right order. They have to be called at the right time, and they have to be done the right way. So I actually think a guy like Shula might be a reasonable option to kind of come in and have a Shurmur-esque approach, but do it better. However, I do think that a better offensive coordinator for us would be Zach Azzanni, who is our wide receivers coach, who was actually attempted to be recruited away from our team into college ball as an offensive coordinator. So it's clear that others believe that he can definitely do that job, and we should seriously consider him as well.
Yeah, and I was just about to point that out. The boss Mandunga is saying, no, Zach Azzanni should be considered for the offensive coordinator position should the Broncos decide to fire Pat Shurmur. So, I mean, if the Broncos do come to that decision, there's really not much we can do, Rich. I mean, it'd be a really big gamble, and hopefully it's something that can, work out for the Broncos, and hopefully it's something that a guy like Teddy Bridgewater and the offense can, turn around and learn how to change the entire playbook in about, a week's time or so. So, and that's saying that he would be the offensive coordinator going forward without the Broncos maybe even looking to pursue a different person for the job in the offseason. So,
yeah, but which coach wouldn't take that opportunity to prove to the league that they are capable? Like so look at it from Zach's side of a point of view, right? His next progressive step in the NFL from a wide receivers coach would be to an offensive coordinator position in all likelihood. So if he can step in and show that he can do the job and do it well and put a good product on the field, even if the Broncos at that stage are silly enough to not retain him if he shows to be a competent offensive coordinator, even if they do decide to kind of move on from the entire coaching staff at that point, which I don't believe they get rid of Zach Azzanni because he's really, really well respected within our organization. But even if we did, if he put a good product on the field, then there'd be at least a half dozen probably or a dozen NFL teams out there that would be willing to bring him in, especially with some of the offensive coordinators likely in the offseason getting head coaching jobs, because that seems to be the direction of the NFL.
Yeah. And Caddy 22920 jumping in saying offensive coordinator should be creative, defensive coordinator should be aggressive. Neither applies to us currently. Caddy, thank you so much for joining us today. I don't remember seeing you, so this is your first time here. Welcome, and hope you enjoy the show.
I think Caddy's been here a few times, but appreciate you. And Caddy, if you or anyone is a fan of the Denver Broncos, we would definitely appreciate a subscription and a share. It certainly helps us get out there and help reach other Broncos fans.
But Caddy's totally right. And if you look around the league, look at what Kellen Moore is doing for the Dallas Cowboys. His jump from backup quarterback to offensive coordinator has done wonders for them. And as much as you don't like to want to believe it, but even Vance Joseph going back to being a defensive coordinator for the Cardinals has helped them get to a very, very good start where they're still undefeated. So the boss Mundung is jumping back in saying it's not so much about changing the offense. It's about when to call what play and how to get your best players the ball. They can use the same offense, earlier, right? Just change the layout a bit, be flexible. Yeah. So he's basically
earlier, which is 100%.
Yeah. So he's just basically, he just said what you said in a different way using big words because that's why he's the boss. But no, I totally agree with both of you guys. It's not so much about changing the offense, but it's just about knowing which plays to execute in what order. And for Teddy Bridgewater, if he's about to execute a play and he sees that the defense is set a certain way, that he can audible out of it and say, okay, that's not going to work. Let's change into something else. So calling audibles is also a big part of being a quarterback. And that's a big issue we had with Drew Lock last year, him not being able to call an audible. And Teddy Bridgewater hasn't really had that issue in terms of, calling an audible and turning a play, even the second play being worse than the initial one. But if he can actually do it a little bit more, I would think that would put the offense in a better place to succeed in trying to get a conversion or touchdowns.
So Johnny Baki stepping in here. Miss you on here, bud. Hope everything's going okay there. So he was kind of going over what Vaughn indicated in his presser here and said, Vaughn said in his presser that he knew he would be covering Claypool and that he blames himself for that blown coverage and will be better. Basically said, I'll be better next time. And is that cause for concern? I'm going to quickly answer that in just a handful of words here. No, because that's what good players like Vaughn say in pressers, and they actually attempt to take that into action and make themselves better.
I'm actually going to disagree and say, yeah, that is a cause for concern, because if Vaughn's going to try to do that against somebody else who has the same assets like a Chase Claypool, what's that to stop it from, blowing a coverage again? So I think Vaughn just needs to kind of better choose who he's going to cover. If it was a tight end, I think he would probably do better against tight ends because tight ends aren't as quick as wide receivers. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. So I think his coverage on a tight end would be a lot better. Whereas if it's like you have to try to chase Claypool from one side of the field to the other, like he did in that play where he just totally got left behind. And I just don't think that's the very best way. And somebody in the chat earlier said that the 2015 Vaughn is not the same Vaughn of what we have now. And that's totally true. And as much as I hate to believe it, that's actually true. So I just think that Vaughn needs to stick to doing what he does best, and that's just getting to the pass rusher. And also, I think this is a good segue, Rich, for us to get into the Mile High Mountain. So if it's okay with you guys.
It is. I just have a few kind of shotgun things I just want to bring up in the game. Before the Steelers game, one of our things that we mentioned is that we need to go into more 2 tight end sets. I did my own little math on that. We ended up going 50-50 almost in terms of 3 wides and 2 tight end sets. The one thing that I did note in that game, though, is they stacked on several of our run plays, both tight ends to the far right-hand side of the line, and then proceeded to run it on the left-hand side of the line where we had no tight end help whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting. That kind of speaks to our earlier conversation about Pat Shurmur and his poor play calling. I also did want to bring forward and bring up the Mike Ford circus flip and tackle on special teams, which I could have sworn someone was going to at least bring up in the chat because they brought it up in the announcers booth there. That was incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was unbelievable. The fact that he actually landed that tackle. And then we had the Javonte Williams 49-yard run. I think that is another outstanding run by Javonte Williams. And I think we are starting to see a clear-cut RB1 for our Denver Broncos in the future moving forward. He seems to do this on the regular now where he's able to shimmy shake out of tackles and run down the field. And that is incredible as a Broncos fan for us to see a young running back on a rookie deal who's able to do a lot, especially when he doesn't have spectacular blocking all the time, which means that he can make something out of nothing. Imagine when he actually has something.
Right. No, and I totally agree with you there, Rich. And as we get into the Mile Mountain here, I did a lot of recap because I couldn't really think about who I wanted to put where. So I think I got it right this time, and hopefully it might be different from yours, Rich. But for me, I think for the very top of the summit for the Mile Mountain was going to be Courtland Sutton, because Courtland Sutton had a really good game. He had 120 yards, I believe. He had a touchdown catch, and he just made those cornerbacks really work for he had their work cut out for him, basically. And if Teddy Bridgewater just had a little bit more time on his hands, there were a couple of passes that Courtland Sutton may have tried to make a play for. So he's my number one. And in the middle of the mountain, which is right underneath him, in the middle of the summit, I guess you could say, is Kendall Hinton, because Kendall Hinton also had a touchdown, and he had a fantastic double toe catch when the Broncos were trying to get into close to the end zone. So for him, those two wide receivers played some really good football. Now, for the base at the very bottom, which is probably like the worst, is going to be the coaching, both Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur, because the defense wasn't on par. They gave up a lot of key plays, and Pat Shurmur's offensive calling for 3 quarters was just stale. It was just punts. And, it shouldn't have come down to the very last quarter for the Broncos to try to make a comeback and try to tie the game, because then it would have been another issue trying to go into overtime and win the coin flip, and then try to give Denver the ball. And if it would have been Steelers, try to keep the Steelers from marching down the field and scoring a touchdown.
Right. So I'm going to mix up the Mile High Mountain a little bit, and I'm going to add in some new catchphrases here, and hopefully they take off. So I have my summit as Tim Patrick. I thought Tim Patrick showed yet again that he is on the incline, which is an awesome thing for a Denver Broncos fan. Now, the problem that we have is that we have both Patrick and Sutton that are kind of both coming into when we got to start thinking about payment. So it would be very, very interesting to see what the Denver Broncos and George Paton does with both Tim Patrick and Sutton. On the precipice, on the way up that mountain, just below the summit, hoping that they gets there at some point, I have Javonte Williams. I think he had yet another one of those games where you're going to remember him and remember his runs and wish that he was on the field more and that we had a better running scheme. And all the way down at base camp, I am going to go with Draymond Jones. I expected more from Draymond Jones in the season period, but I think where he really showed that he needed a lot, that he has a lot to work on and needs to do more, was in the Steelers game. The Steelers had rookies at their offensive line. They had 2 rookies on their offensive line, and we did not get that pressure to collapse the pocket to make Big Ben uncomfortable. And I mean, you could arguably pick your poison. You could go with Shelby Harris, or you can go Draymond Jones, but I'm going to go Draymond Jones also because he had that penalty in the game as well, which set us back. And last but not least, the newest addition to the Mile High Mountain, and that's those 2 people that we decided to send on the plane home. They didn't even stay at the mountain because we didn't want them there anymore. And that is Pat Shurmur and Fuller. I don't really think I need to go into any more details as to why they're there.
Very well said, my friend. And I totally forgot about the plane home segment. And I guess for me, sending home, it would probably be Fuller as well. And I would probably say Alexander Johnson too, for the simple fact that he had 2 interceptions that he should have caught, but they were dropped. And as for a guy of his caliber, being on this team that long, that's totally inexcusable. He should not have dropped those passes. The boss Mundunga is saying, offensive line continues to be a problem. I got to be honest, with the guard not playing as well as we know they can play, I have to blame Cush. Am I wrong, Rich?
So we all know how I feel about offensive line and offensive linemen. I think they are probably one of the most critical position groups on the team, starting at the offensive center, moving to the guards. Cush is definitely a problem, 100%. However, I'm going to push back a little bit on the fact that Cush is the only problem, simply because we saw Miners in there. And while he had a couple of plays where he wasn't particularly great, he played the majority of his time when he stepped in for Reisner at a much, much higher level than Reisner did when he was in the game. So I do think guard play can continue to be at a high level, even with Cush in there. But I don't think Cush is doing anyone any favors because he has not really taken any major leaps forward to speak of, and that's going to hold us back.
I have to agree with you there, Rich. And unfortunately, Cushenberry's chance to shine hasn't really come to fruition. Now, he hasn't regressed, but by now he should have advanced himself where it should have been him trying to show out, especially when he's got another person behind him, breathing down his neck in terms of trying to get his job. So he's got to play better. Otherwise, the Broncos could decide to move on from Cushenberry in the offseason, either promote Miners or maybe even look for another free agent center or just retool that entire thing according to how Mike Munchak sees things. So with that, let's go to the next one. Ivan Diaz saying Broncos won 3 games they were supposed to win and lost 2 they were supposed to lose based on preseason predictions. They should have won against the Steelers with how bad they were playing and injuries. So he's actually right, Rich. And we all expected the Broncos to win that game against the Steelers, but it was kind of like week 1 when the Steelers played the Bills. The Bills were expected to win that game and they lost. The Steelers came and beat them. And it's something that you can't underestimate a team, even if they're 1-3. We kind of saw that last night with the Colts. The Colts almost upsetting the Ravens, but unfortunately the Ravens were able to barely come out of that one alive as a winner. So I totally agree here with my cousin here. It should have been a game that we should have won, but unfortunately everything that was supposed to happen didn't, and everything that didn't happen did.
So so this all depends on who you asked and who you polled. So obviously I wasn't including your cousin's polling here of what we were supposed to do and what not. I'm only modestly offended. So I actually had us losing to the Ravens in my preseason predictions. I did not think we were going to be able to beat Lamar Jackson, given the player personnel we had on defense. I did actually have us beating the Steelers because I believed that our pass rush would be able to prevent Ben from doing what he was able to do in that game. And I expected more from our interior defensive line at the onset and beginning of the season. Clearly I was mistaken, but I actually had us beating the Steelers. And frankly, if you looked at the game, we probably should have won that game. Really, if you look at what happened, that was a winnable game for us, 100%. And yet we managed to basically throw the game away with poor play calling and, just uninspiring play.
Yeah, our interior defensive line has to get better in terms of getting to the quarterback because they did a decent job in trying to get to Lamar Jackson, a quarterback who's one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the league. So it was kind of frustrating to see the defensive line not being able to rattle Big Ben. And the only time I believe was that strip sack that Malik Reed had, and that was on a blitz, if I'm not mistaken, where he came in and just totally caught Big Ben from behind. So those kind of defensive plays are the plays that make the Broncos defense dangerous. And unfortunately, we didn't really see much of it after that turnover. So, and as we segue into Raiders week here, Rich, going into the Broncos game against the Raiders are coming in really, really crippled emotionally, and just their head is not where it's supposed to be or where it was 2 weeks ago. They're coming off of 2 losses just as we are. But the way that they're coming in, that whole team has got to be discombobulated coming into Denver.
I agree. I do want to segue a little bit and kind of do 2 things here at once. Mr. Mundungus Creevy here is asking about drafting a center or going free agency in center. I actually think that drafting a center would be a good idea. There's a really solid center that's coming out of college, I believe, in next year's draft that is looking he's actually looked like he might even go top 10, which, depending on where we finish, may or may not be in the cards. However, I actually think that bolstering our offensive line is the right way to go in the draft, especially if we're looking to try to lay the groundwork to potentially going after a free agent quarterback, if that's the direction that George Payton wishes to move in, and having an offensive center who, we've heard Peyton Manning actually in some of these, the Manning brothers segments there, talk about how important, and even Eli has mentioned about how important that Jeff Saturday and I can't remember that guy's name.
Reggie Wayne?
Pardon me? O'Hara. Mark O'Hara. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How important that relationship was for both of them. Now, to segue that over towards the Raiders game, the interior of the Raiders defensive line has actually produced fairly well this year, and they've really wreaked havoc on other teams. And I believe that in and of itself may be a challenge for our Denver Broncos. And this may actually be the perfect segue to get ourselves moving over to this week's Hot 5.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Hey, how's it going? This is Wi-Fi Willie from Wi-Fi Willie's Pro Football Podcast. I run a Pro Raiders YouTube channel, basically. So I'm here to tell you the 5 things the Raiders need to do to beat the Denver Broncos in Denver. So the first thing that I would say is for the first 3 weeks of the season, the Raiders are actually number 2 in passing. So as far as the amount of plays that were passes that they called, the percentage was number 2 in the NFL. Only the Chiefs were passing at a higher rate than the Raiders from the first 3 weeks of the season. So I think with the trouble that the Raiders have had in the run game, they need to get back to what they did against the Ravens, against the Steelers, against Miami, which is rely on Derek Carr's arm, rely on Derek Carr passing the ball on first and second down to get you in a better position on third down. Just because the run game's not doing well, the O-line's a little banged up, we don't have no incognito this year, right? So I think that's something they need to do. Now, the second thing that I think they need to do, and this is related to the run game, is stop the run game by staying in their base defense more. We know Gus Bradley runs that 4-3 and then the cover 3 defense, right? But I have seen several situations in the past few games where the Raiders have been in the nickel in the red zone, and I just don't understand it, especially when you have a lot of trouble stopping the run. We know Austin Eckler actually had his career high game in rushing yards against the Raiders. Very unfortunate to see on Monday night, right? So I think that's what they need to do. Stay in the 4-3 more, get KJ Wright out there as much as you can, and let's try to stop the run, and let's try to stop Denver's run game. So that's one thing I would do. And then another thing too, aside from the run game, that's been an issue. Also, the red zone efficiency has been an issue. Raiders have a really poor ranking. Last time I checked, I believe last week, it was 22nd in red zone offense efficiency, and the same thing in defense. Defense is doing well, primarily all around, but when it comes to the red zone, there's been a big dip. So I think that comes with play calling. I think Gruden, he's too accustomed to having a really good offensive line. And in previous years, when it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, yes, halfback dive up the middle with Josh Jacobs, let Rodney Hudson and Gabe Jackson clear some room for you. I mean, that's what he's used to, and he has to understand that might not be the team we have this year. So I think more creative play calling all around from John Gruden could really benefit this Raiders team. Now, the fourth thing I would say, because I'm not going to lie, I don't have too much faith in Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. I have a little more faith in Teddy Bridgewater than Drew Lock, right? So I think the Raiders need to keep up this pass rush. Max Crosby, man, I think this guy should be the defensive player of the year. He has the most pressures of any player in the NFL. Now, that's including defensive tackles like Aaron Donald. That's including, other edge rushers like TJ Watt. Max Crosby leads the NFL in pressures and QB hits. You saw what he did to Big Ben in week 2. He really tore him up for the rest of the season. So I think the Raiders need to keep applying the pass rush, keep doing what they're doing there, whatever they're doing is working out, especially with Crosby and Unique Ngakoue. Now, the fifth thing that I think the Raiders need to do, and I think this really comes with the coaching staff and the players and also the fans. This is something that the Raiders fans need to do. And I think that's have faith in Derek Carr, because he's had, 2 games that were rough. Statistically, they're bad games. you can't put the entire blame on him. Obviously, the offensive line has had some struggles, like I talked to you before. The play calling has been a little suspect, especially for certain critical situations like the red zone. So, Carr, this last game, I think it was probably his worst game of the season. You know, he did miss some wide open people a couple times. He didn't let the pressure get to him too much, but you just saw him not be on the same page with the rest of his receivers. We know in the background there's crazy media stories happening with Gruden and whatnot too. So not only Carr, but I just think this whole team, this fan base needs to have faith in their quarterback and their head coach and know that they have been able to produce at a high level before and they can keep doing it, and they are just going through a rough period right now. Keep having faith with them. Don't weaken the morale, you know, which is happening especially when you're losing football games. So that'd be my fifth thing. Have faith in Carr and Gruden. So my name has been Wi-Fi Willie. Thank you guys for hearing my 5 reasons why I think the Raiders will straight stomp on the Broncos in Denver. I might even go to Denver. I know I heard you guys got legal gambling there, kind of like Vegas, so maybe I'll stop by. But I will just say, let's go Raiders.
And thanks again to our special guest, Wi-Fi Willie, for giving us his hot take 5 on how he believes that the Raiders will beat the Broncos. Now, Rich, what I take from that is, unfortunately, he recorded that before the news broke out about John Gruden resigning from the Raiders. And hi, Bree. And there was a comment here that I wanted to highlight. Dave Glassman saying, don't underestimate the power of a significant event, losing a coach, Hurricane Katrina, etc. We can't sleep on these guys. And Dave is right. But what I meant about taking advantage, Dave, is basically taking advantage of a Raiders team that's not all there. You know, right now, the Raiders are kind of down in the dumps, and the Broncos have to take advantage of that. Just basically get them out, get that offense out of sync. Now, what our guest mentioned about Max Crosby, he's totally right. Max Crosby's been one of the best pass rushers in the league so far. So our left and right tackles are going to have their hands full this weekend, Rich.
First off, we need to be very careful. You just said that the Raiders aren't all there. That could be misinterpreted. So we just need to be very, very careful at how we speak. But no, I mean, there's certainly there's going to be emotions that are going to run high and that sort of thing. Now, with regards to Dave's comment, I did respond back there in the comments that amongst Raiders fans, there's actually a bit of a divide there, where a lot of the Raiders fans kind of have a bit of a Shermer syndrome as it applied to John Gruden, in the fact that they did not feel that his play calling was particularly good. They didn't mind the offense, but they didn't like how he was calling the offense. And so I actually do wonder, depending on who steps in and fills in for that play calling role, if you might kind of see foreshadowing. Maybe one could hope a little bit on the Denver Broncos with our offensive coordinator, who is in a flaming hot burning chair at the moment, looking ahead and seeing what a new play caller might be able to do with calling a similar or identical offense, and if it makes a difference.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if this new interim coach comes in and decides to change things his way, or try to keep the Raiders offense going with the playbook that they've already been used to, and then modify it as time goes along. But either way, Rich, the Broncos defense needs to step up, because both of these teams are coming in losing back-to-back games. So it's going to be really crucial for the Broncos team in general as a whole to be hungrier for a win than the Raiders. So I believe that the Broncos defense, especially the pass rush, has to get to Derek Carr. They have to make him uncomfortable.
Agreed.
Now, thankfully, the Raiders running back game has not really been as good as it's been in previous years. Josh Jacobs has been really struggling. And I forget who their second one, or Kenyon Drake has not had a season anywhere near the season he had when he was a Cardinal. So the Broncos don't have to forcibly stack the box. They don't have to worry like they did with Najee Harris and with Lamar Jackson the last 2 games. So the secondary should really be on their toes and look out for the speedy Henry Ruggs and what's his name, the other Hunter Renfrow, who's just been a pain in the rear for most defenses these last few weeks.
I think we need to be careful not to be complacent. Josh Jacobs has burned us for enough yards that we should know enough to respect the fact that he can be a very good player. And I mean, when was it? Was it last year or the year before? I mean, he just absolutely tore us apart. Like Josh Jacobs, like single-handed.
Yeah, it was last year in Vegas.
Last year. He just literally just like that one. Oh, it was brutal. But you can't underestimate the power of a solid running game. And you also don't know kind of where the team's at and how they want to go about it. So maybe they want to, unleash a little pushing and, get some anger out. So they might try to go really aggressive in that kind of ground and pound style game. On the flip side, for the Denver Broncos, I would like to see us run what we saw ourselves run in preseason. We saw a tight end on the left of Garrett Bowles. We saw a tight end on the right of either what would have been or what is Bobby Massey at right tackle. Bobby Massey has not had a very good season. And we need to get to a point where we can start aggressively running the ball and instilling an identity on the offensive side of our ball, of the ball for us. The problem is that we don't really know who we are as an offense right now. And I think we can say that plainly and honestly as Broncos fans. Most of the time, most teams by week 5 have a pretty good idea of who they are as a team offensively. They're either going to be more of a run-happy team or a pass-happy team, or they're going to be that kind of balancing act that kind of starts going, run, play action pass, run, pass, kind of that 50-50 style team. We really don't know who we are just yet, and we really need to figure that out. I think our offensive identity should be that gritty run team, kind of what we know our Broncos to be from when we had all that success with TD, where we were that real good running team, kind of ground teams down and wore them out. I like to see more of that.
Yeah, basically Denver has to get back to playing in front instead of trying to play from behind, especially at home, because the Broncos need to use Mile High to their advantage. And I'm not just talking about the altitude. I'm talking about everybody in the stage, the sounds, the thunder, the noise. And it's something that I believe that the Broncos really didn't use to their advantage when they faced the Ravens 2 weeks ago. So with this being an AFC West game, it's a division game, so it's going to mean a lot more to try to get that win. So I want to believe that every single person going on that field, whether it's offense or defense, are going to be highly motivated to take down this Raiders team and just get that jump up ahead of them. Because as we've seen so far, Rich, it's not the Chiefs that we have to worry about like we thought at the beginning of the season. It's the Chargers. The Chargers are playing really good.
Wow.
Yeah, they're playing really good football. So, everything that we thought was going to happen since week 1 has totally went a different way. So right now we have to get past the Raiders, and then we're going to have to worry about the Chargers soon enough. And then towards the end of the season, we'll deal with the Chiefs.
So, I actually said early in the season that I actually thought that the Chargers were going to be a really good team this year. I've said that on Twitter and a few other spots, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, you don't know that, second year QB, blah blah blah." Meanwhile, you look at what the Chargers are doing now, and wow, do they ever look good? But I still think that we really need to get back to more of a running style game. You can sprinkle in and mix in play action pass when the team has to respect the run, and you've shown them that you need to respect the run. And to jump off of Caddy's comment there, I actually think that Jerry Jeudy, with kind of his route running, where you typically probably want to put him in the slot and let him get those yards after the catch, leverage Teddy Bridgewater's ability to throw a pinpoint ball and a quick release on that. I think Jerry Jeudy becomes more an extension of a run game and can really start stretching the field by getting those additional yards after that catch, by having him kind of in that same spot where the linebackers and the safeties are going to have to focus on the running back, and they might not be able to pay as much attention to him. So that's kind of where I see Jerry Jeudy fitting into the offense personally.
Mm-hmm. I believe this question is directed at you here, Rich. The boss thing, we keep saying that Shermer's style of offense is old and outdated, but you want our identity to be the late 90s offense?
No, I think Shermer's offensive play calling style is ineffective and inefficient. I think some of his plays are absolutely horrific and should just be scrapped. But I think that Shermer is trying to force too many 3 wide receiver sets when he does not have the offensive player personnel to run that type of an offense. So the 3 wide sets, while they are somewhat prevalent amongst other teams in the NFL, they are not exclusively the only set that people run in the NFL, people run from in the NFL, the 11 personnel. But Shermer's issue is that he does not have the offensive line to hold up for those long passes that he likes to throw. Our offensive line is not good enough to hold up for a wide receiver to get 20 plus yards down the field. We've seen that both this year and last year. At some point, he needs to adapt, move to a quick passing game, more of a run style game, and then you leverage play action pass as a result of that.
Well, I think the addition of John Brown is going to be really good for this Broncos offense. Now, Brown does have a bit of an injury history to him, kind of like what we had with Hamler, but I don't think it's as bad with the hamstring. But I do like the signing here, Rich, because if it's one thing that Bridgewater needs, it's weapons. And Courtland Sutton, as great as he is, most of the time he draws double coverage.
Can I just quickly jump in there?
Yeah.
Who's Brown?
John Brown.
I'm playing dumb. A lot of people may not know who he is. I threw you a bone there, and you just threw it back at me a second time.
I'm sorry. I didn't know what you were saying. I was like, Brown.
I'm trying to have like a banter back and forth, and you're just like, what?
I thought you were trying to do like a UPS joke or something. I was like,
no. So Brown is the wide receiver we just signed to our practice squad. Actually, it was just announced by the Denver Broncos Twitter account just before we went live.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't know, we signed a wide receiver to our practice squad. He's known for his speed, however, does have a mixed injury history, which is where 6'10" Mexican was jumping in and explaining. Please continue.
Yes. See, this is why we have to be early before every show. But I do agree with the signing. I think it's a very good one. Now, he's only signed to the practice squad, so hopefully he doesn't get snagged up by another team while he's on there. I don't know what the designation the Broncos have in terms of putting him in for somebody else. We're probably going to have to wait until Friday when the injury report comes out, so he could be a last-minute addition. And I hope he actually does play and he doesn't just end up being a healthy scratch, because that was kind of weird that the Broncos activated Darby, but he was a healthy scratch and he didn't play against Pittsburgh. So I do believe that maybe the coaching staff did that as a precaution. Maybe he wasn't at 100%. Because I think they all learned their lesson from the whole thing with Bradley Chubb and bringing him in a little bit too early than expected. So at least they did that right.
Darby was looking good, and then right before and around the game, they had a discussion, and he said, like, I'm not quite there yet, and the coaching staff decided to hold him back. There's mixed reports as to if it was the staff that held him out or Darby approached them and said, I don't think it's a good idea. But either way, the right decision was made because, whether it was the staff or Darby or both, they held him out as a result of one of the two parties saying it's not a good idea. And I'm always going to support that decision, especially when we've seen how important Darby was, because he was one of the main reasons our secondary was playing so well in the first few games. So you'd hate to have, as you aptly pointed out, kind of that Bradley Chubb situation where he came back just a little too fast and then is knocked out for an extended period of time as a result.
Yeah, he just re-aggravated an
right, exactly.
So it'll be great to have him back against the Raiders this coming week. So I think that basically just to go over what we need to do to win this game is basically make Derek Carr feel uncomfortable in the pocket like he likes to throw. If you take away his wide receivers, he usually has to settle for, check downs or hand off to the running back. The Raiders defense, their secondary, I'm not so much worried about, but Max Crosby, like we said at the beginning of the segment, he's somebody that if our left tackles cannot handle one-on-one, then you're going to have to probably put a tight end on there, either to double block or to chip. You're just going to have to make him feel uncomfortable. Garrett Bowles, I believe he can handle Max Crosby if he lines up against him. Bobby Massey, his first year as a Bronco, and as you said, I wouldn't say he's been terrible, but he hasn't been excellent, So I think that if you had to put help on one of them, it would probably be on the right side if Max lines up against him. but we just have to make sure that Bridgewater stays upright and that he doesn't make any boneheaded throws or, ill-advised plays when he runs out of the pocket.
Yeah, I think what you end up seeing is Bowles has had more plays and elements of game or portions of games rather where he's held up. Massey has had more plays in games where you actually looked back to see if he even touched the guy that he was supposed to block. Right? Like there was one play, and it was either the Steelers, I think it was the Steelers actually, where the guy completely juked him and it wasn't even close. You almost started saying, oh my gosh, this is like Menelik Watson, this is like Juwan James and the other guys there. I mean, it wasn't even bad, it was atrocious. So you literally had the guy juke Massey to kind of more to his right, and he completely took the bait and left a massive gap to his left, and then the guy just went straight clear path towards Teddy Bridgewater, and it was just bad.
Yeah, another point that our guest made was that he said that he himself wasn't really afraid of Bridgewater as he would be of Drew Lock, and to me, that's a really big understatement. And if it's one thing that Raiders defense should not do, it's underestimate a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. Granted, Teddy has not had the best 2 games. Has not had his best 2 games so far, but it's kind of like what we were saying. When you corner somebody, you're going to see them become a different person. And Teddy Bridgewater he's due to have a big game, and I have a feeling that it's going to come this week against this Raiders defense.
I think what some people are seeing are things that you really can't deny watching the games in the film. Drew has a zip, but that's not, I agree. That's not what I heard. I'm pretty sure he was saying he has more confidence in Bridgewater.
No, he has more confidence in Bridgewater, but at the same time, I took it as, he's not intimidated by either Bridgewater or Drew Lock.
He's not intimidated by either, because he told me that.
That's basically, I took that as an understatement. So that's right. To clarify.
But Drew Lock has certain elements in his game that would certainly mean that there should be some concerns. He has more zip on his passes. So when you're in these really tight windows and you need to really fire something in there, Drew has more zip in order to make that throw. Problem is Drew's also horribly inaccurate, and he's proven that just with his footwork and everything else. So although he can make that throw, the question is, will he make that throw? And the answer to that, unfortunately, as we've seen as Broncos fans, is not all the time. Right? Now, Teddy Bridgewater, I think this is another play calling issue that I think we've seen with the Denver Broncos, particularly as of late, is we need to try and get as many of these linebackers and safeties on our opposing teams to kind of bite forward and really force them out of their standard game plan for a Teddy Bridgewater and a Denver Broncos offense. So what we saw with the Steelers, the Ravens, is they didn't respect our run game particularly almost at all. And they had quite a number of guys that were set back in coverage. So we need to start forcing the run with those tight ends to kind of force them to kind of move away from their original game plan, play to us, not us play to them. And then from there, you can start attacking further down the field. You can start throwing those long throws. You can start doing play action passes, and it'll start to work.
Yeah. And the boss saying, back to Brown, though, he has had 2 1,000-yard years, one with Arizona and one with the Bills. So we are getting a good wide receiver. Not a number 1, but a good speedy number 3. And that's exactly why I thought he was a really good signing, because he has a lot of traits just like KJ Hamler has in terms of being a speedy number 3, being the guy that can outbeat a coverage if the defense is caught snoozing or whatever. So that's why I think his signing is going to be really good for this team. We just need to see who is going to be the person that the Broncos put on IR or take out, and to put Brown in as their number 3.
Moore had an interesting game, just to jump off that exact point you just made. Moore was the guy we kind of signed who has some speed, and he did get pretty open, not like wide open, but open in that last game, and the throw was not made. But he wasn't KJ Hamler open.
Right.
In the point where KJ Hamler was so shifty and quick in and out of his breaks that he was able to get almost to a point where he was wide open and Teddy just kind of threw it to him. And then KJ Hamler was able to run almost in stride. So, yeah, exactly. I think this comment's perfect. So he's less like a Hamler and more like an Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to describe him. And I completely agree. But when you look at what Sanders was able to do, Sanders was able to use like a quick juke or other elements of his game in order to get himself a little bit more open than I think what we saw from Moore in this past game. So it'll be very, very interesting to see if Brown can put that on the field for us in practice. And we may see a shift where Brown gets called up just in advance of the game, knowing that we need that extra speed to help stretch the field and make everyone a little bit more honest in the back end.
No, I totally agree with you. But I think the biggest point as we get towards the end of our show here, Rich, is that the Broncos need to take the lead. They cannot be playing, keep playing from behind. And I know I've said that like 2 or 3 times already, but it's something that we've seen so far in the last 2 games. And Teddy Bridgewater, it plays a lot better when the Broncos are in front than when they're trying to play from behind. And as we saw in that very last throw where he threw that pick, Rich, it was a forced throw. The coverage was there. I saw 2 different players that were open on that play. So I know it was Bridgewater going for the home run because he probably could have went down low, but it wouldn't have been for sure even if he hit that player that they would have been able to get into the end zone without being, tackled being tackled short.
Well, you shouldn't be relying on a last minute, drive to try and win a game like that. We had so many opportunities in that game against the Steelers to win. But I do agree to transfer this over to the Raiders. I think that what we are going to be able to do in this game and should be able to do in this game is start forcing the run, start forcing our opponent to play to us, start owning that time of possession again, and keep and maintain that lead. And then once we can do that, I think Fangio can then kind of do what Fangio likes to do best. And that is, he likes to kind of play to more conservatively until he has a lead where he's comfortable. And then he'll just send his rushers to try to, end the game as best as they can. And he will allow guys like Vaughn, Cooper, Reed, and I forget that other guy's name that we signed, that he literally looks like DeMarcus Ware on the field. It is freaky. His body type, his height, it is, and he's wearing 94, which certainly doesn't help at all either. But I mean, literally, it's like the DeMarcus Ware clone who, if he can develop, wow. I mean, we have done very, very well at bringing in lesser known guys that are seemingly putting up some production when it comes to pass rush. And that's a position that's a premium. So if you can get modest production out of some of these guys that are rookies and kind of undrafted guys, wow, have you ever done well? And we have a great track record of getting production out of undrafted or lesser drafted pass rushers.
Yeah, and I think more than anything here, Rich, Vic Fangio needs to put out a really good game because he needs to take some of this heat off of him. Because if it's one thing that we said going into this season during the offseason is that a lot of us felt that Vic Fangio, his last season was because of COVID, was a bit of a safety net for him. So we couldn't really blame him all the way. But this year, he doesn't have that excuse. He doesn't have no safety net. So every single mistake, every single error, every single loss is just going to hurt his chances of trying to make a deal with the front office in terms of, him bringing him back as a head coach next year. And don't get me wrong, I love Fangio as a defensive mind. He's an awesome defensive coordinator. But so far as a head coach, he's not making a very strong case for himself to say, hey, look, I know what I'm doing. He needs to start getting some W's on that board and showing not just Broncos country, but showing a guy like George Paton who, I'm pretty sure he's not happy with the way the team is run. And unlike John Elway, who's used to seeing this team, in orange and blue colored glasses, I feel like George Paton isn't afraid to be the guy to say, hey, look, Vic, this isn't working out. And unfortunately, you're fired.
Yeah, probably. And that's probably one of the reasons why they brought George Paton in, was to kind of do the difficult assessment pieces. And in some respects, add an additional layer between Elway and, the dirty work, so to speak. Now, I am curious as to those that are joining us today as we get closer to the end of the show here. What are your comments in terms of what you think our defense needs to do to stop the Las Vegas Raiders? It's still weird to say it. Bends the mind when you have to say the Las Vegas Raiders. What do you think we need to do defensively to stop them? And on the flip side of that same coin, what do you think we need to do as the Denver Broncos to beat the Las Vegas Raiders? Or if you're a Raiders fan joining us, what do you need to do to beat the Denver Broncos?
I think we've pretty much gone over what
we've gone over. I'm curious what others have to say as well.
Right. But I think that mostly everybody's in agreement in terms of the offense has to play better. The defense has to play better, and getting Ronald Darby should be that spark for that secondary to get those turnovers. Our outside linebackers have to, aside from Malik Reed getting that strip sack was amazing, but Von Miller was almost non-existent this past week against that Steelers offensive line. And we didn't see that much out of Jonathan Cooper that game. So, and Dave here with the saying we need to stop beating ourselves. That's also another good point. And it's just basically should the Broncos be down, they shouldn't be playing like they're totally out of it and not wait until the fourth quarter to, force the ball. Because when you force the ball, Rich, that's when you're forcing yourself to be more open to make a mistake in terms of a turnover or interception or turnover on downs or just something dumb like that. And then you really put yourself in an even worse position in the field.
I just want to thank Avatar. Aaron Patrick is the name of the player I was thinking of. I'm not going to lie. It is just freaky. He literally looks like DeMarcus Ware on the field.
Bree saying, death by 1,000 tiny cuts bleeding this roster dry. Both sides of the ball are extremely talented. Play calling and cutesy throwing Miller into coverage on Claypool is egregious. And also, why step back from things that are working, running, fan targets? Those are all really good points. And if you follow Broncos Twitter, those are all things that people on Broncos fans on Twitter were asking, like, why isn't Shermer running the ball? Why are they not targeting Noah Fant? Why aren't they doing plays that work, the screen plays? Where did all that go? And instead, it's just Teddy Bridgewater trying to heave the ball down the field, and it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's a real head scratcher there, Rich.
I am going to push back a little bit on the last one. I think Fant needs more passing targets. I agree. But I think the other challenge that we're going to run into is with Albert O's injury. It has taken a legitimate dual threat. I mean, Albert O was killing it this season. Because he was showing to be a far superior blocker to Noah Fant, and it wasn't even close. And he was also showing that he could be broken out, run down, and catch the ball. Noah Fant had one really good block. And in fact, in the Steelers game, it was Noah Fant who sealed the hole to allow Javonte Williams make that 49-yard run. So as much as this is contradictory, or that is contradictory to what I'm about to say, generally speaking, Noah Fant is not a very good blocker. And more often than not, this season, he has not blocked well. So the problem is that he is not a liability, but certainly not a strength in the blocking game as a tight end. So if you're going to start moving into these two tight end sets and whatnot, you need to have a tight end who is a threat, both catching the ball, kind of like we saw Joel Dreesen, remember when Peyton Manning was here, where he could block like nobody's business, and all of a sudden he just kind of broke out and it was like a 20-yard run. We saw Saubert do that a lot in the preseason, where he caught it 2-3 yards past the line of scrimmage and then threw guys out of the way for like a 13 or 14-yard gain. That's the type of tight end play we need to get with flexibility at that position. Noah Fant is very much like a really large wide receiver who is playing a tight end position. We need him to step a little bit in his blocking game so that teams quite literally need to guess what they expect out of him.
Right. And Ivan saying someone has to step up besides Vaughn and put pressure on Carr. Look at what the Bears did, and they have their limitations as a football team and got the dub. is Chubb still out? Yes, Bradley Chubb is still out, and he's going to be out for a couple more weeks. Hopefully his recovery will come at a time when the Broncos are ready to bring him back and they're in a better position. But that Bears D-line, their interior D-line so far is playing a lot more better than Denver's. So for the Broncos defensive line to be great, both parts, the inside and the out, have to work together in terms of putting the pressure on. And it can't be the two guys on the outside putting in more work than the two guys in the inside. And unfortunately, that's kind of what we've seen with Draymond Jones and Shelby Harris and even Mike Purcell. They haven't really been being those beasts that we've seen them be over the last 2 seasons. So I'm hoping that they go out there and they really put a hurting on this offensive line and make Derek Carr's job even harder to do and force a turnover, and if not, another strip sack by Malik Reed.
Yeah, no, I agree. You need all 3 interior guys, though, to step up and apply pressure inside. In some respects, I agree with you. My comments were very much saying Fant should fit a scheme. My flip side to that, though, is that's why you also draft guys that fit what you want to do better, right? Mm-hmm. Denver Broncos drafted Noah Fant and then failed to use him properly. Well, they used him properly when Scangarello was here, where they actually had him do exactly what you're referring to, Bree, which is how he should be used. That the problem is that I'm looking at what Shermer's current scheme is and what we have practiced thus far, and it's going to take at least, I think you can agree with me here, 2 to 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks, for if we do make an offensive coordinator change, like a Nazani, or even bringing in Shula, or have a bit of a committee where you might have Shula mixed with Munchak, because he's another guy that could potentially fill some of that role as well. You're going to need to take some time to redevelop some of those offensive schemes in order to better utilize Noah Fant in things like seam routes and tight end screens and that sort of thing, which I agree with you. That's where Noah Fant's going to absolutely kill other teams because he is a complete mismatch, and that's how we should be using him. The problem is that when you look at what Shermer's scheme is, it commands better run blocking out of the tight end. And if we are going to run those 2 tight end sets with the 2 tight ends on either side, you need a guy that is basically respected in both blocking and passing.
So totally agree. But unfortunately, guys, we are running late, and unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get to everybody's comments. So this is going to have to do it for us today. Guys, thank you so much to everybody that joined us in the chat today, from the boss to Bree to Ivan to EJ and everybody. I'm sorry if I forgot your name. But guys, if you enjoyed this content, please make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button so you get live notifications on when we go live. And if you love Broncos Talk, then you're going to love our other shows. Don't forget, every single Thursday, we have the flagship show, MHRT, on the YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get to see Mundungus, Glenn Hauser, Mr. Boggins, and myself, where we go over all Broncos news. And on Fridays, we have the Nothing Rhymes with Orange and Blue podcast with our good friend Johnny and Isaiah, and they'll go over the other Broncos news as well. And of course, we have the pregame show, which is the Neigh-borhood, which airs live before every single Broncos game. And for every Broncos home game, we have a live tailgate report from the Mile High Prophet. So make sure you guys are subscribed to us on Facebook, Twitter, any of our social media platforms, so you don't miss a single moment of the action. And Rich, before we go, of course, we have to do the Mile High Five. So for those of you that are new and you don't know what the Mile High Five is, you put your arms up, and after I say Mile High Five, you just clap them up in the air. So, Rich, are you ready?
I'm good to go.
All right, here we go. Mile High Five! Woo! Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you all next time. Hasta luego.